Hey, what's up you guys? Back to my channel. Today I am reacting to 9 Dark Hetalia HeadCannons by HetaFacts, and it was just sent to me by this one person right here. Oh god, I gotta do it right. So guys, let's get right into it. And remember guys, I'm not against being short now. Boop. I'm sorry, I haven't booped in my video. Oh my.
Hello my fellow Hetalians and welcome back to HetaFacts. Hetalia is normally a very light-hearted show. It very rarely dives into dark parts of history, and instead chooses to focus on the more silly, more positive things. But every now and then, we get a glimpse of something dark. Because of the light-hearted nature of the show, it leaves a void for fans to dive into and explore the dark parts that are absent. I've touched on a few dark theories and headcanons in Hetalia, including Russia constantly freezing to death over and over again, Prussia killing Lithuania's siblings, Russia possibly being decapitated sometime in his life, Latvia not being able to grow because of brain damage, and the death of Knights Templar. Originally, this was going to be a silly, crazy theory video, with theories like Moldova is Romania's son instead of his brother. But since you all are a bunch of edgelords, I thought that dark headcanons would be a lot more interesting.
Oh my god, I used to be
asked for suggestions on your dark headcanons, and I'm not going to lie, the majority of them were pretty cringy and bad. Some of you made some interesting headcanons though. But here are a few that I would like to contribute to the mix. So here are 9 dark Hetalia headcanons for you all to enjoy.
Oh my god.
Poland's death. I'm honestly surprised this headcanon isn't more popular. As we know, when a nation ceases to exist, it is considered to be dead. Poland wasn't simply annexed after the fall of the Commonwealth. It was cut into 3 pieces with the intent of destroying the Polish nation once and for all. Since Poland disappeared for 130 years, technically he should have been considered dead, or possibly disappeared or in a coma. Something along these lines is mentioned in his character bios about how Poland comes back like a phoenix, and how he often describes himself as being like a phoenix. A phoenix is known for being reborn after it dies. This doujin really emphasizes what that would be like in this situation. I'll put a link in the description below. Of course, Poland came back, but much different from other nations that died before him. But this may allude to what happened to the Holy Roman Empire and how he turned into Germany, further connecting another theory about there being 2 Polands. But since the Polish identity then is strongly connected to the Polish identity now, I would think that they would be the same person.
Oh my god.
We also know that nations can visit other nations as ghosts. So, here you have Poland, he's dead. What do you think he would do as a ghost? Oh, come on, we all know where this is going. He would scare the hell out of Lithuania. He probably felt incredibly guilty about what happened. And that is another story. But Poland being gone for over a century, he would probably be very confused, waking up after missing the entire Industrial Revolution.
Oh my god.
Incredibly freaked out. Perhaps this would lead him to believe he needed someone to help him get readjusted to this new life. And when that person refused, he felt alone and abandoned. Perhaps that made him a bit angry. He felt like he had been robbed of 130 years of his life. And he couldn't handle the fact that his friends were moving on without him. Switzerland's scar is from his mercenary days. From the early modern period to the Age of Enlightenment, mercenaries from Switzerland were hired out by many different countries to fight in their wars. The Swiss soon had a monopoly on military for hire, but this ended with Switzerland's military isolationism later on. In Hetalia, we see Switzerland doing mercenary work for Austria and quite a few others. Sure, they might have looked ridiculous, but these men were not to be messed with. They were ferocious and brutal in battle. it can be assumed that that scar on his chest is from those mercenary days.
Whoa.
And this may also be the reason behind Switzerland's strong commitment to neutrality. Since Switzerland is a mountainous area and has trouble growing crops, he had to turn to mercenary work in order to get money for his country.
Aww.
He didn't have the option to be a peaceful country that just grows crops for a living. Since he spent the majority of his childhood and his adolescence fighting for other people, he has decided that he never wants to fight again, nor get caught in other people's conflicts ever again.
Makes sense.
So, he cut himself off from the rest of Europe, claimed neutrality, has been a hermit ever since.
Dude, that's human.
Shock therapy. I'm surprised no one else has thought of this before, and it would make for such an amazing concept.
Bro.
After the fall of communism, many former communist nations, notably Poland, Estonia, Czechia, Slovakia, Latvia, and Russia, and Albania and Bulgaria, all went through economic reforms that were known as shock therapy.
Shock therapy?
In this case, shock therapy refers to the sudden release of price and currency controls, or sudden economic liberalization.
Are you serious?
Withdrawal of state subsidies, and immediate trade liberalization within a country, including large-scale privatization of previously public-owned businesses. Basically, a sudden switch to capitalism without a transition phase.
It wasn't that long ago.
Places like Slovenia, Estonia, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, it was considered a success in some areas, but a failure in others. There's still controversy over its effects today. Most can conclude, though, that it failed in the short term, but was better in the long term. But the transition period was very rough.
I can tell.
There was great economic depression. Poverty was more than 10 times its original amount, which led to problems such as excess drinking and high suicide rates. Translating this into Hetalia, if they went through literal shock therapy, like electroconvulsive therapy, it would be an interesting portrayal.
It would be.
The economic devastation, without a doubt, would have led to a lot of very ill nations, which makes sense since some of the side effects of ECT are confusion, retrograde memory loss, nausea, headache, jaw pain or muscle ache, and increases in heart rate or blood pressure.
Dude.
Many different interesting events were also going on during this time period as well, and for each character I have separate headcanons. Russia's case is often called a shock without the therapy, and during this time there was also an alcohol epidemic going on, so it can be assumed that Russia developed a big drinking problem, worse than the rest of the nations going through this. Czechia and Slovakia were going through the Velvet Divorce at this point, and one of them thought they could save their union by doing this together. Since Lithuania was rehabilitating at his house, Poland felt that it was his responsibility to take care of him for once, rather than the other way around. So he sought to improve himself so his best friend could rely off of him. But taking care of Lithuania during attempted coups and a large wave of suicides is quite a difficult task, especially while you are recovering from ECT. Romania was the one who drove Bulgaria to all the appointments, but Bulgaria probably chickened out halfway through the treatments. Latvia was one of the few to receive memory loss as a result of shock therapy. Latvia's spaciness could be the result of shock therapy as well. This led to Estonia feeling responsible for Latvia's condition and watching after him for a while. Yeah, you can tell this was one of my planned fanfictions, but I didn't think it would get enough attention for the work I would put into it, so I scrapped it. But it is nevertheless a very interesting concept that I would like to see more of.
Dude, this is so freaking
The Ottoman Empire's impact on Bulgaria. One thing that Bulgaria is known for is nodding his head when he means no, and shaking his head when he means yes. It is said that this tradition comes from the days of the Ottoman Empire, when the Ottomans were threatening Christians in the area. In Christianity, it is a sin to lie about your faith, so Bulgarians simply changed the head gestures so they weren't technically lying about their religion.
Bro!
While they were allowed to at least practice their faith, Christians in the Ottoman Empire still suffered great persecution, especially during its decline. This included social exclusion and persecution, very high taxes and forced labor.
Oh no.
Perhaps some of Bulgaria's other mannerisms, such as his self-degradation and the depressing songs he sings and his ability to make any situation brighter for himself, all stemmed from this dark area of history. That's what he learned from living as a Christian under the Ottoman Empire. He had to learn to look at the bright side of things, otherwise it was going to be a very, very dark time. He had to come up with some method to cope. And after constantly being degraded for his religion, it got into his head that he really was inferior. Lithuania and the suicide epidemic.
What?
A lot of suggestions on my channel was insert nation has depression or insert nation has committed suicide at one point. But I think that one nation may have fallen into that category, maybe two. The only time when suicide is mentioned in Hetalia is in discussing a few things like plays like Romeo and Juliet and this character's bio, and that is Lithuania. Here it discusses how Lithuania has the highest suicide rate in the world, but it doesn't just go to modern times. Suicide has been tied to Lithuania since ancient Baltic times. Let's go back to the 13th century, when Lithuanians were a new nation composing of united tribes. Among the other Baltic nations, the Lithuanians were known to be quite feared, because they were known to terrorize other Baltic tribes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Another thing that many tribes knew was that the Lithuanians were known to not fear death. For Lithuanians, it was an honor to die in battle. And many Lithuanians, when they lost, took their own lives instead of surrendering.
Wait, what?
That was Lithuanian warrior tradition.
What?
I think that under this situation, Lithuania as a teenager probably would have tried to do the noble warrior thing in the past and commit suicide to avoid being captured, only to learn that he can't die. I think that if anyone would have attempted to end their lives, it would be out of honor like Japan or Lithuania in a situation like this. Now that I think about it, I think seppuku might have been mentioned a couple times in Hetalia as well. And Japan does seem like that put honor first kind of person. But when it comes to modern times, later in the 1990s, when many nations were going through shock therapy, or in Lithuania's case, trying to gradually transition away from communism, which still brought a lot of devastating economic effects, but more importantly, suicide rates skyrocketed.
What?
And while in other places in the Soviet Union it eventually went down, it never seemed to go down in Lithuania. It was during that time, around the early 2000s, that Lithuania gained his infamous reputation that has stuck ever since. It would not be surprising if Lithuania has attempted this more than once. Davy's last name was Jones. I have discussed how human names are an alias for nations rather than the names that they were born with. This means that the nations probably chose their names instead of having them be given to them.
Oh, cool.
My headcanon is that while choosing his name, America remembered his dear childhood friend. To honor him, America took Davy's last name, which happened to be Jones.
Oh, that was simple but very dark.
Venetiano is fading away. Many people seem to think that if any one of the Italy brothers were to fade away, it would be Romano, since Venetiano is the main character.
Oh.
Romano is no longer his own country, and Venetiano seems to do all the real country stuff. But what if it was actually Venetiano that was fading away and Romano taking over?
Yeah.
Rome is Romano's heart, and Venice is Venetiano's heart. And Rome is currently the capital of Italy. So it would make more sense for Romano to inherit the country over Venetiano.
Oh.
After all, he is older and more serious than Venetiano. Maybe the reason Italy Venetiano is the main character is because he's living his last moments as a nation and reliving his life before he dies off. Maybe Romano lets Venetiano represent Italy at world meetings and G8 meetings because he knows his little brother has very little time left and wants him to feel important before he dies. Romano is insanely jealous of Venetiano.
Oh my god.
He's talented with drawing, business, tourism. He's his grandfather's favorite, the Germans' favorite, Spain's favorite. Everyone seems to like him more.
Oh my god.
His entire life, Romano has always played second fiddle to Venetiano.
I know that feels.
And Romano is normally a grudge-bearing person. But Romano never seems to express much of this to his brother. The reason he doesn't is because he knows his brother won't have that much longer. I don't actually believe this headcanon for many reasons, but I just thought it would be fun to put here. Belarus hates her sister because of the Chernobyl incident.
Wait, what?
Chernobyl was the plant on the border between Ukraine and Belarus that had a notably catastrophic meltdown and thus resulted in a lot of environmental damage. Even though the fallout took place near Pripyat, Ukraine, the radiation spread affected Belarus more than it did Ukraine. Many more places in Belarus became contaminated and had to be evacuated. A fifth of Belarusian territory was affected by the Chernobyl disaster. As a result of this incident, both sisters had to be quarantined, and both definitely suffered the effects of radiation poisoning. And Belarus still strongly blames her sister for her irresponsibility that continues to negatively impact her.
Oh my gosh.
Prussia's role in World War II. While Germany may have not been indoctrinated into Nazi ideology, his brother may not have been the same. After all, Prussia has the right kind of personality and attitude that would latch onto this ideology of being superior to others, conquering other lands in the name of improving the nation.
That makes sense.
And the move towards authoritarianism, which Prussians held as a part of their ideology for quite some time. This philosophy was one that allowed the people to be free but ultimately respect authority no matter what. Also, the biggest stereotype of Prussians was that they were warmongers. We can see this throughout Prussia's character songs, his attitude, and his behavior up until modern day where he has mellowed out. After the Poisonschlag, he may have been hesitant at first. After all, Hitler was an Austrian, and we know how Prussia feels about Austrians. Once fascism took hold, I think Prussia would have been more on board. Prussian heroes like Friedrich the Great were lauded as examples of heroes during the Nazi times.
Although no one would claim Prussia is the founder of Nazism, some see the connections between Prussian militarism and subservience and the Third Reich. Historians say that nationalism was what brought the downfall of Prussia.
The Prussian Junkers contributed to the rise of Hitler. The last Prussian Junker warlord to hold power in Germany appointed Hitler as leader and as his successor.
Huge sections of the German
Why did I
armed
learn this in high
forces
school?
during the
Why
Second
did I not
World
learn
War
this in high school?
were run by the Prussian military class. A lot of the initial military successes at the beginning of World War II were due to the tradition of Prussian military leadership. Maybe later on, when the Germans started to lose the war, Prussia may have become annoyed with Hitler, as many of the war generals became annoyed with him.
Of course,
since they
he
were
was a
losing.
dick.
This prompted a few to take part in Operation Valkyrie. It's not like they opposed his belief system. It's just that he was leading them to many military defeats. Of course, not all the Prussians were bad, but again, the Prussians had a legacy of being warmongers. And in some cases in modern Germany, Prussian praise is associated with the Nazi times. Not to mention, in East Germany, there were many schools that either deflected blame from the Holocaust onto the West, or just didn't mention it at all. That nationalistic pride that Prussia has would match this ideology perfectly.
It really would. Oh my god, it's so terrible.
Well, I'm sorry for making you all sad today.
I mean, very confused.
Let me know if you want me to do another one of these in the future, since I had to cut out a few headcanons due to time restraints. If this video gets about 10,000 views, I'll consider it, but until then,
That was 1 mark higher on your history test.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching HetaFacts.
Bye! Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this long video. I am very, 2 creepy videos in a row. God dang it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have anyone we do, please comment down below. What was on here, we guys got to say as well. If you want to check out my second channel, it'll be linked down below as well. And I will get to everybody just as fast as I can. Stay safe out there, guys. You guys are awesome, beautiful. Love you guys. Bye.